Well, hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Test House webinar for Microsoft Test Manager. My name is Peter Mannering, and I'm a Visual Studio 2012 consultant. Just to tell you something about Test House, we're headquarters in London, but we have regional offices worldwide. We have centres in Madrid and Dubai, as well as London, sales offices in the United States, and we aim to provide cost-effective quality testing services. Here's a list of some of our clients, both large and small. We have large clients like Visa and Microsoft, as well as smaller clients, so any job in the testing sphere we can help you with. On to today's material then. There are several subjects I'm going to cover today. I'm going to give you a quick overview of manual testing. Then we'll talk about test plans and test suites, which is how things are organised within MTM. How to create a test plan, and then how to create test cases that actually help you to do the testing. Then how to execute those test cases, and if you spot any bugs, how to create a bug report and verify that the bug has been fixed. Then we'll be talking about how to data drive with parameters, and finally automating test cases. And there will be some exploratory testing, and then how to look at test results as well. These are supplementary test techniques. So, to start with then, manual testing overview. Well, you can see from this diagram that there are a lot of different testing techniques you can use while developing software. From the left-hand side, you have the manual testing, which requires little technical skill, just the ability to follow a script, all the way to the right-hand side, which can require expert coding skills and can really be quite difficult and technical. Throughout all of this is the black box testing, which is just trying to test the application as inputs and outputs. And then over to the right-hand side, you have what's called white box testing, which requires knowledge of how an application works, the coding of the application, to make sure that all the code inside is actually being tested properly. And programming and testing for APIs as well can be very technical. It turns out that 70% of testing happens actually in the manual testing area. But the majority of test tools on the market actually target the higher end of the testing, where you might need some scripting skills like test automation or test management. So there's a bit of a gap in the market, and that's where Microsoft Test Manager is aiming to help your testing efforts. So we have a variety of tools which are available for these different kinds of testing. MTM uses Test Runner. You can see it on the left-hand side. That's purely for manual testing. You can do some automation with it. And over on the right-hand side, you have the more advanced kind of tools like web testing, coded UI testing, and unit testing, all of which require some programming skills. Underpinning the whole thing within Visual Studio is Team Foundation Server, which acts as a repository for all the information and data which is gathered by as the project goes forward. Within MTM, Microsoft Test Manager, there are actually two areas. We have the Testing Center, which we'll be looking at today, and that allows you to create and execute test plans and test cases, and also analyze results as they come back as your tests are executed. There's also Lab Center, where you can manage your test environments both physically and on virtual machines, but we won't be looking at that today. But there are two areas to MTM. So test plans and test suites, absolutely vital to the way MTM works. So the first thing you have to do when you start using Microsoft Test Manager is you have to actually connect to Team Foundation Server. MTM requires Team Foundation Server because it is where it keeps all of its results and all of its data. So you can see a screenshot there of actually attaching to the server name where TFS is, and then you have to set up a team project collection. and within that you can define test plans. Test plans allow you to have different iterations of testing. For example, if you use an agile-like methodology, then it's a good idea to have one test plan per iteration. Then you know exactly what tests have to be done within each iteration. Now, tests can be quite easily copied between different plans. So if you have a set of regular tests that you do for each iteration, you can easily copy the tests between the different plans. And the whole system automatically keeps track of what tests have been executed and the results of every test. So within a test plan, where you could have several within a project, you have to set up test suites. These are containers for your test cases. Test cases actually being the individual list of steps to complete one particular test. Within each test case, they're made of test steps, as I've said, which is just the instructions that can be as simple or as complicated as you think is required for that particular application. You can have things called shared steps as well, which means you can have a library of these common steps and then use them throughout your test cases. And you can also have parameters, and to do data driving. I'll be looking at that a little bit later. So with these test plans, they're really there to organize all your testing efforts. And you can have several plans within a project who can be different. So you can have a plan to initialize a project to start off with, and then you can have regular plans that are sort of midway through your project, and then you can have a release plan for your final testing. Now all your tests are organized into test suites, which can be deleted and copied around quite easily. The test plans have two states, active and inactive, so you can actually create a test plan and not have it active until you're ready to actually use it. On the right-hand side, you can see an example of different test suites being created, and as I'll talk about soon, you can have different kinds of test suites based on requirements, queries, or just have what's called a static suite. You can also have configurations as well, so that your testers know to test against certain operating systems, for example, or browsers, or even hardware. You can set up these configurations, and you can allocate them to different test suites and different test plans, so everyone knows what environment they should be carrying out their tests. Here's another example of test plans. You can see there the acceptance tests, and all the different tests that might be needed throughout the project can all very easily be separated and organized within test plans. At the lower level, you have your test suites. These are your containers for your test cases. They can be created as a hierarchy. The actual plan, the test plan name, is the root of the hierarchy. Probably not a good idea to have too many layers in the hierarchy. Just keep it simple, at least to start with. As I mentioned, there are three types of test suites: requirement, query, and static. And we'll be looking at each of those in a bit more detail. Associated configurations tells the tester what kind of environment they should be testing under, and of course all that is recorded as well. And suites can easily be copied between your different test plans. So your test suites can be based on the requirements. So if you have requirements already set up within TFS in your project, you can instruct Microsoft Test Manager to create test suites based on requirements. So you have one test suite per requirement. That's very good to know you've got complete coverage. Or you can base them on work item queries. So, for example, all priority 1 test cases will automatically be included into a work item query type test suite. And you can import test suites from other plans as well. You can assign test suites to users. So a tester, for example, will have responsibility for all the tests within a test suite. And also configurations can be assigned to your test suites. So all the tests on a certain bit of hardware, for example, could all be stored within one test suite. And there are 3 states for the test suites: in planning, in progress, and completed. And if a test suite is in planning, that means nobody can actually execute any test cases which are in that suite until the test suite is made to be in progress. That's just a way to stop people from prematurely executing those tests. Here's a static test suite. They're created manually, and they can be divided into other test suites, of course. So that's to do with the hierarchy. So your static test suite is just whatever you choose to put into that particular test suite. They're called static because they don't change automatically. They have to be changed by whoever is managing those particular tests. Query-based test suites are a little bit more complicated. You set up one of these test suites. You're given a query, which is a little bit of SQL, and then any test suite which fulfills that query will automatically be included within that test suite. So you know for certain that all your test cases of a particular type can be found in one place. And requirements-based test suites, possibly the most useful of all, enables you to ensure that all your requirements are being tested against. And as you add more requirements to a project, for example, you can always add more of these kinds of test suites to make sure that tests are being written to make sure those requirements are being fulfilled. Configurations, as I've said, is just a way to make sure that your testers know what kind of software and hardware should be used to do these tests against. So if you have a website, for example, that you're testing that can be used on multiple browsers, then you can ensure that all the browsers you expect to be used are being actually used within the testing. So here's a screenshot of creating some test suites. On the left-hand side, you can see at the top of the hierarchy, you've got demo test plan. That, of course, is the test plan, which is at the root of the hierarchy. And then there we've got 3 test suites of different types. So add number is a requirement, priority 1 cases is a query, and others has been created there as a static test suite just to contain any kind of miscellaneous cases which don't naturally belong elsewhere. And on the right hand side is where you actually add and look at your test cases. So a demo of creating test cases, test suites. So here we have a test plan called iteration 1, and we're going to create some test suites to hold the test cases that we're going to eventually make. So I'm going to make one based on the requirement, and we have some SQL here. It automatically says team project equals the current project you're working on, because that obviously is probably what you want it to do. And we want to look at anything in the requirement category that's new and has the correct path that we're interested in, and it will return. Here's, for example, a bug that we can look at, and we can look at the test cases which are associated with this bug. And if we wanted to, we could open that up and take a look at it. So everything is nicely linked together, but we're not particularly interested in that at the moment. If we look at this add numbers requirement, so we're interested in creating this test case, test suite. We know that we are going to cover this particular requirement. We can add the requirement to the plan, and then we see add numbers requirement as a container for all the test cases which will test that requirement. Up here you can see add numbers requirement, and here's a link to that requirement in TFS. So if I click that link, I can go straight away, jump over, and I can actually see what's in that requirement. So I can see what what we'll actually be testing. Here's the status of the test suite. It's in progress at the moment, which is probably not what you want to start off with. So if I drop that down, you can put it into the in planning stage, which means no one can execute any test cases from this test suite until we're ready. So to create some more test suites, you have to make the test plan, give it focus. And I'm going to drop down a new test suite and do one based on a query. So now I have this bit of SQL which I can edit, and this will drag in any of test suites that I like to be in one place. So I've got priority here. So if I want to create another line in SQL, I can do so just by clicking that line, and I get another clause, and all the test cases will be pulled together in the results, or priority 2. So if I create that test suite, straight away you can see I've got all of the test cases there automatically included, and any other priority 2 test cases that are created in this project will automatically be included there. If I make the test plan highlight again to give it focus, I can create the other type of test suite, and that's just a static test suite. Okay, so I can just give it a name there straight away, and that's just an ordinary test suite which has doesn't gather any particular type of test case. It's just somewhere where I can create and copy test cases to. It's just an ordinary container. Okay, so that's creating test suites. Now, moving up into the lower level, there are, of course, the test cases, which you put into your test suite, and they're just a list of instructions which you want your testers to go through. And in 2012, they can actually be rich text, which means you can have italics and underline and bold and different colors to your words to give different emphasis. As I mentioned before, you can have individual or shared steps, so you can have a library of common steps that are used for several different test cases. We can data drive the test cases, which we'll be looking at later, and you can kind of do a semi-automation on these test cases. I say semi-automated because even though your interactions with the application and the test are recorded and can be played back automatically, any tests that you need to carry out on the interface still have to be carried out manually, and that's something else you'll see a bit later as well. So here's a screenshot of creating a new test case. You can see you've got your test steps down there. On the left-hand side are the actions you want your testers to carry out. And on the right-hand side, you have the option of putting in an expected result. Not every step has to have an expected result, obviously. It may just be you want to move the application into a new state. But any expected results there, when the test is run, the testers will have to say pass or fail at that point. And there are lots of other things you can do with test cases, which you'll see later. So, creating test cases. Okay, here we have our suites already. So, the next thing we need to do is create some test cases to go inside them. So, here's the add numbers requirement. Now I can add a test case which already exists. I can find them by the way of this piece of SQL, and there's some clever things you can do with the SQL, like you can have subqueries and things like that to return different lists. And if you run the query, you get a list of all the test cases that fulfill that query, and you can just simply add any of those into this particular test suite. but we're not going to do that right now. I'm going to show you how to make a new one from scratch. So you press the new button, and the first thing you should do is give your test case a meaningful name. It's a good idea to have some kind of system in place so that people know what you're testing just by looking at the title. If you have iterations in your project, you can set them. You can assign them to a certain tester, give them a priority. I can see that this has not been automated. And also project areas can be defined as well and set with that control. So in order to start creating some test steps, you just click on the action on the first line there and simply type what it is you want your testers to do to carry out this particular test. So we're going to open the application, whatever it may be. And if there is an expected result from that step, you just type it next to it on the right-hand side. So this is a very simple example. These steps obviously can be more complicated. It also depends on how familiar your testers are with this application, how much detail you should add onto these lines. It's completely up to you. So we do some simple arithmetic, and should anyone need to know what the answer should be, you can put it on the right hand side. One more sum, just to round things out a little bit. Okay. And one more step will just close the application. So those are the test steps. Very easy to add. And you can see that the tick by the side of the lines there means that there's an expected result that needs to be tested when the test is actually run. I can simply add another step just by clicking it, or there's a button up there, insert step, and I can insert a step anywhere in the test that I like if I decide it needs another step or a bit more detail. I can delete steps by clicking that button. I can change the order of the steps I've written by the up and down arrow. I can insert shared steps with that button, but that's something we haven't got time to look at in this particular demonstration. But that's what you use that button for. So the shared step can be anything from logging into a system, for example. If that's done very often, you can have a shared step for that. Insert parameter is a way to do data driving. You can replace hard-coded numbers with numbers from a data set. I'll be showing you how to do that a little bit later. Both the inputs and the outputs have to be taken from parameter values from a table that would be built up at the bottom. Another thing you can do is you can attach an external document to any particular line within a test case. So if you've got, for example, a requirement specification that you think would be useful for your testers to look at a certain point, you can include that as an attachment to a certain line in the test. So that one there indicates that there's an attachment to that particular line within the test. There's some other bits of information that you can put in a test case. You've got a summary here, so people can write comments and a running history of any interactions they've made, what tests they've done. Here's a list of links that tells you what's being tested by this particular test case. There would be links here. In TFS, you can link pretty much anything to anything else. So if I wanted to link this test case to any other work item within TFS, I could do so in this screen. I could link it to a bug, for example. Using this button, you can actually define what kind of link it is. I can attach documents from the system to this particular test case, not against any particular line, but just to the test case. But this lists the one that's been put against the test line. And here's one for automation. If you automate a test and then you fully automate it with another more advanced kind of test, you can associate that advanced test back to the test case. Here's an example of using that rich text, the bold, for example, just to make things stand out, give things more emphasis, and you can make things really stand out by using colours. So all in all, it makes following the test. It should make following the test very easy for your testers when they come to actually perform these tests. So you can save that test case, and there it is within the test suite. Okay, so now that we've made our test suites, of course we need to, our test case and our test suites, we need to execute some tests. So whenever there is an expected result defined within the test case, the tester has to manually pass it or fail it. And for a test to completely pass, then all the individual tests must pass. If a bug is found, then straight away a bug report can be created and sent to the developers and put in TFS for future reference, which will automatically include a lot of very useful information that's been taken from the system. All the test steps will be replicated there. A lot of system information will automatically put in there. You can include screenshots. We'll see how to do that. Bugs can easily be verified. So if a developer thinks a bug has been fixed, it can easily be verified by looking at a list of open bugs within MTM. When you run a test case, they can be suspended and paused, so you can go away, do something else, and then come back to it later. And of course, all test results are automatically generated and stored for reporting and project management. You will be able to see which configurations and tests still need to be done against a test case. So if there's more than one test configuration against the test case, it will have to be executed more than once. Running tests can be done manually or semi-automatically, and you'll see how to automate a test case a bit later. And if you automate a test case, you make something called an action recording. And that action recording is then stored within TFS and can be brought out and used at any time you want to run the test case again in the future to save time and effort. So here's an example of the calculator being run as the application being tested by a simple test case on the left-hand side. You'll see this running in a moment, but it's a very simple idea that you just run the application on the screen, follow the test steps, and see whether the expected results are apparent on the application. So executing these tests, we'll run the test from this add requirements test suite. We have to be in the test area. You see on the top there, you've got your we're in the planning area, but we're now in the test area. And to run the test, you simply highlight it and hit the run button. Now we have the test runner here that appears on the left-hand side, and the test steps there are waiting for us to follow. There are several things you can do with this test runner. You can dock it on the right-hand side of the screen if you're not happy with it over there on the left. if there's more application there for you to look at. You can have it floating, so you can move it as you perform the test to look at different parts of the application. Or you can have it, you can look at, just to look at the test in full, maybe. You can open it right up to make sure you're not missing anything. And you can just put it back to normal and resize it like that. But I'm going to put it over there on the left. Now, if you look at the actual test itself, you can look at step number 1, and it says Open App as our first action we have to do. And here is where you mark the test as passed or failed. So let's open the calculator. You see it opens successfully, so we partly mark that as passed. Then let's say we've done some mathematics. Of course, in real life you would actually do the mathematics and check the answer, but I think we can safely assume that that's going to work properly. If you hit that button, you can suspend the test and go back, and then hit the return to test runner button, and then hit the resume button there at the front. That means the test will now resume as if you haven't left it. And you can continue on with the test. So a little bit more mathematics. You can drop down, and let's say that's failed. So we didn't get the answer 5, we got something else. So straight away we mark it as wrong there by the cross, and we can put in a comment against that test line. We can take a screenshot, which is very useful for the developers, of course, to see exactly where the application has gone wrong. So we can drag and drop over what we want to put in the screenshot, and that has all been automatically included in the test results. Now, we can create a bug straight away. As soon as I can make it, I can add to update an existing bug if I know there's one outstanding for this particular problem, but let's create a bug from scratch. So hit that button, and we have an empty bug report for us to fill in. But it's not completely empty because a lot of information has automatically been included. So we have all the test steps, we have the screenshot we made, we have my comment of the wrong number, we have some links to some more detailed information down there, which might be useful if it's a very detailed technical bug. Hit the system button. A lot of system information is already included there from the system that's been running. There's a link to the test case that was being run when the bug was found. That could be useful to look at the test case. You can assign tasks to do with this bug report, and we can look at that. We can have a history and links and attachments just like any other work item within TFS, and all the other details you would expect with a work item, like the state, the reason it was opened, severity, for example. You can assign the bug to a certain person within the team, and of course it needs a name, a good sensible name for the bug so people can see exactly what it's all about when they look at it. So we'll go back to this area. You can see which line failed exactly, the point of failure, and we can save and close the bug report within TFS. And now we can continue with this if we like. To finish off this testing, we can hit that and we can end the test there. And you can see that the system has automatically marked the test as a failure because there was at least one failure in a step, so the whole thing has failed. We can save the results, and that test has now been included in the failure status. And here's that bar just gives you an idea of the distribution of failed and passed tests within this test case. So if I just for a second go over to Visual Studio, and let's say that we're a developer now, what happens to that bug? What's the life cycle of that bug once it's been written? Well, I've got a query here which returns all the bugs within this particular project, and there's the one we've just added. So the developer can see that there's a new bug there waiting for attention. So we'll open that up, we'll take a look, and we can read all the nice details of this new bug with all the information that's been included. Now let's say that I've done my work and I think I fixed the bug. Okay, I can put a comment in there and change the bug status, so people know that I've finished working on it, and save it back to TFS, back to the central repository for the whole project. Now if you switch back to MTM, okay, we can have this verify bugs area, right, and we can look at all the outstanding bugs in the system, including the one that has just been worked on. There it is. Okay. Now, if you see something you don't expect in the system, it's always worth trying to refresh your screen, because that ensures that it's got the latest information from TFS, so we can see there that it's in a state where the developer thinks they've looked at it and fixed it. So we can open that bug, and we can filter them. We can look at all the bugs that are just assigned to me or created by me. So if you hit the verify button, the system will load up the test case that was in operation when the bug report was made. Okay, and we can start testing. So let's go through this test, and we'll say for demonstration purposes that everything is fine and the bug looks like it has been fixed. We can end the test there, and the system gives it an overall pass, and we can save the bug away, save the case away. Now we can see we have this extra bit of dialogue which gives the tester an opportunity to update the bug, to either say that yes, it has been fixed, or to put a comment in to the effect that there's still a problem, and they could bounce it back to the development team to say it still needs further attention. But let's say they've done a good job and it has been fixed. And we'll save the changes, and the bug status will be updated to so that it's closed. But that makes communication very easy between the testers and the developers. Very quick, direct communication. Very, very fast response to bugs that have been found. Okay, so we've just looked at bugs, but you can attach everything to all the information is automatically attached to the bug report. You can link it to other things as well. You can include screenshots, and all the bugs can be tracked from MTM as well as managers tracking it from their preferred data sources. There's the button you use to create the bug. You can create a fresh bug or update an existing bug if you know there's one actually referring to the problem that you found. The next demonstration I'm going to give you, the next thing I'm going to talk about is data driving with parameters. So this is where some sorts of tests lend themselves very well to data driving. That is, you can replace constant values with variable parameters. So if you know about programming, you'll very quickly get the idea. And what happens here is you can replace the constant with parameters that you name. So your actual test steps in your test cases will have these parameters included. And then you have the opportunity to write rows of data that will be used to replace those named parameters. So it'll be a data table, and let's say you have 3 rows in your data table. That means the test will be repeated 3 times. each with different data, input and output data. It means that you can be very flexible with the tests that you're running, and you can check things like boundary conditions very, very easily. So this is what it looks like in MTM. You have the num1 and num2 and answer parameters, and then at the bottom there you build up a data table where the system will take the data from when it runs the test. So looking at an example of how that works. So I have a test that I want to data drive. I want to add some flexibility to a test, so it's not just blindly following one kind of test. Otherwise, to run a lot of similar tests, I'd have a lot of work to do to create many kind of tests of the same type. Instead of doing that, it's a lot easier, more sensible to just use data driving with parameters. So I'll open up this test case, and you can see here there's some mathematics. So to data drive it, quite simply, you just take the hard-coded numbers, that's the 10 and the 20 there, and you delete them, and in their place you insert a parameter, which you can name how you want, so I'll call that num1, and same with the other hard-coded number there, num2, and of course this only makes sense if the answer is variable as well, because different inputs will create different outputs, so the output also has to be turned into a parameter. Now at the bottom there you can see a table being built up with num1, num2 answer. So the headings there match the parameters which I put in. So all I have to do now is type which numbers I want to be presented to the tester when the test runs. So 10, 20 is 30. And the second test was 40, 10 is 50. Okay, simple as that. Now you can delete iterations if you want to, or you can rename the parameters on the fly quite easily if you change your name about the parameters. You can delete whole parameters there. There's special buttons for doing that, so it's quite a flexible system, easy to use. Now this line here, we don't actually need that line now, so we can just delete it, because that test has now been included by virtue of the data. So we can save and close that test case. Go to the testing area where you execute the tests by pressing that button at the top there. And we will execute that test to see what it looks like. There's our calculator. Start the test. So open the application, that's the same. But you can see here in the second step, instead of hard-coded numbers, we've got num1 and num2. So we'll just mark that as passed. But here you can see it's telling us what num1 and num2 are, and also what the answer should be. So it is telling us what we should be putting in and what we should be seeing. So we'll mark that as correct, and mark that as correct as well. Now at the bottom here we see end iteration and move to the next. Before it was simply end test, but now we want to go and move on to the next iteration. And start the next iteration, and we go again. But this time the second row of data is being presented to us in this particular test. So now it's end iteration, and that marks the end of the test. So the whole test automatically gets a pass mark, a pass status, so we can save and close, and that test has passed using that data driving. Okay, so we'll move on now to automating test cases to make things a little bit quicker when you come to rerunning tests. You can record your actions for playback, and then when you're actually recording the test, you go through the test as normal, and when you go through it, a recording is automatically being made for you. And when you come to play the recording back, you can fast forward through as many steps as you want. That allows you to verify bugs quickly as well, because you can see the bug and you can fast forward through the recording to see if the bug has been fixed. And it's a start point for coded UI testing. Coded UI is a powerful automation technique, a lot more powerful than the automation you can do with an MTM. But you can use these action recordings as a starting point to make life a bit easier when you actually come to create them. Within Microsoft Test Manager, the automation works by recording your manual tests, or you can automate using parameters to automate having several tests in one test using different inputs and outputs. Within Visual Studio 2012, you can use coded UI tests. You can link these coded UI tests back to the tests within Test Manager, and you can data drive them with an external file rather than a bit of data which is stored within Team Foundation server. This means you can have potentially thousands of lines. You can access a database and use that as your data source, so you can have as many lines as you want, and it's a lot more flexible, and you can actually drive tests, the action of a test rather than just the inputs and outputs of a test. So it's a lot more powerful technique. So you can see here an example of a test that's being recorded. If you notice, there's a blue line being built up against the test steps there. That's an indication that those test steps have actually been recorded. Okay, here's some notes on the coded UI tests. They're actually made in a similar way, in as much as you use a recorder and you go through what test steps you do during a test, and that's recorded for you. But you can actually build in other things as well. Like you can build in assertions, that is the tests that actually need to take place during a playback and what results should be seen. So the test is completely automatic. You just press the button and the test runs, and you get a pass and fail at the end. So it is totally automatic. So here is a demonstration of how we can automate a test. These test automations are obviously very useful for regression testing. You possibly near the end of a project, so to make sure that any updates to your code has not broken any tests that have gone before. You just make an automation out of it, and then you can rerun the automation, and you can see very quickly if the test is still valid. So let's automate one of these test cases then. You just run it as normal, highlight it, and hit the run button. So we need to record every step this time. So we create an action recording. We just tick that box. At the bottom they say there's no recording available. So this is the first time we've tried to produce an action recording for this test. So start test. And you can see at the bottom there's a clock, recording clock, which tells us that we are recording. So we're now actually doing a recording. There's a symbol there at the top of the application that tells this is the one that is being recorded. So now, again, as before, you can see the clock ticking up there. As before, we just go through the test steps, and we can do the tests. We record all the interactions with the application. We still have to mark things as passed or failed, of course. You can see the blue line being built up on the right-hand side of the test steps as an indication that the recording is taking place. So we'll do the second bit of arithmetic and mark it as passed. And the last step, of course, is to close the application down. End the test. And it turns orange, which means that the recording has been completed. So those are the steps that have been recorded. So we'll save and close the test case. Now that recording, called an action recording, has now been stored within TFS and can be retrieved at a later date. If you double-click the test case there, you get to see previous runs. You can look at how things have, how test results have gone for that particular test case over time. So if you run it back, you have the option to overwrite an existing action recording and make a new one. See, there's an action recording available. But we're just going to start the test so we can run it back. We have several options when it comes to playing a test step. You can play a single step, you can play all the steps within a test case, and you can also preview test steps, and this will show you what has actually been recorded for any particular test step. So you can see there that the open step has actually recorded a launch of the application, so that's correct. And we can play it. So you just hit the play button, and that step is being played back. But you still, as you can see, you still have to pass or fail any test steps, any expected results. Okay. Now again, I can preview this particular test step. You see there's a bit more complicated. A few more buttons were pressed for this step. You can highlight more than one step at a time. And also you can preview that as well, so you can look at as much of the test as you want. So let's just replay that one step. You can see the system automatically performs that step for us. And we have to mark that as passed. We can highlight whatever steps we need. If we play all, that means all the steps in a particular test case will be executed in one go. That's a good way just to make sure that your system at least works, and before you delve into a system and do testing on it, you can see that it is acting properly. So once we end the test there, again, all the steps pass, so we have an automatic pass status on the whole test. You can create, of course, bug reports and screenshots in exactly the same way as you did when you were stepping through manually. I can use this control to pass or fail a test. So if I see something which is suspicious, that isn't particularly covered in the test, I can mark the test as failed there manually. So that's how to automate your tests within MTM and play them back. Quite a useful technique. Okay, exploratory testing is another kind of testing which is very useful to add to your testing efforts. Usually, testing is done by someone sitting and writing a test case, as you've seen, and they think about all the things that could go wrong, and so they write their tests accordingly. But quite often, things are missed. In complicated applications, you can't test everything, and quite often people don't think of the kind of failures which could occur. So with exploratory testing, it's a different kind of testing. What you do is you just get an experienced user or experienced tester to sit down and try and use the application as they would perhaps in a normal day, or perhaps they try and use it to extreme, or they'll try to use it in an incorrect way to see how it responds, to make sure that it's dealing with error conditions properly. And while this is being done, a recording is automatically taking place in the background, and if a bug is found, then a bug report can be issued immediately, and all the recording up to that point can be used to create a bug report. Also, obviously, you're not following a written test case, so therefore you need a test case to do verification once the bug has been fixed, so you can check that it has been fixed. But the system will automatically create a test case as well based on that recording. Now, that test case will almost definitely need to be manually updated and improved, but it is a very good starting point for your verification test. And you'll see this in a demonstration in a very short time. So it gets around all of the common drawbacks of exploratory testing by automatically doing a recording and producing a bug report and producing a test case for your verification. Here's what it looks like. You simply go into the test area and do exploratory testing, and then you simply hit the Explore button, or you can do exploratory testing against a particular requirement, or you can just jump in and start doing exploratory testing and see if you can spot any bugs in the system as you improvise and use the system. Okay, it looks slightly different to the test runner you've seen up to now, but it's the same kind of idea, except of course there are no test steps. But at any time you can include screenshots and you can include comments in what you're doing, and that's all stored. So when you come to create a bug, here's the kind of thing you'll come up with all the test steps. And also another good feature is that you can edit which test steps actually get included in the bug report, because it may be that you're using it for a long time, so obviously not all the steps will be relevant to the bug that you found. And it has a go at producing a test case, but as you can see, there's no expected results, and you may need a bit more explanation on the action side, but it does give you at least the steps that have to be completed to find the bug. So you update that to be a bit more meaningful, easy to follow, and then another tester can use that to verify any bug fixes. And the exploratory testing sessions are automatically stored so that management knows what's been going on, and anyone can go back and look at previous exploratory testing to see what's been happening. So we have Explore here. So if we're going to just try a little bit of exploratory testing, perhaps maybe towards the end of your project cycle, you invite an end user to come down and try to use the system, see if it does what they want it to do, to see whether they can break it. So it's a good idea to do this kind of thing before release, so there are no nasty surprises after it's been released. So just hit the Explore button and start. Okay, and away you go. You start to use the system and just see what happens. So I'm just using the system as a user would, maybe trying some extreme examples, trying some error conditions. Okay, so I can put in a comment if I want to. Maybe there's something there that I'm not particularly happy with, but I'll carry on. Okay, now maybe I've seen an error, so I can grab a screenshot as before. That's very useful. Okay, and there is in the bug report a list of the steps which I've taken to get to this point. So of course a name is required for the bug report. There's my observations with a screenshot that I took. But if I have too much detail in there, I can change the steps that are included in the bug report. Just by hitting the Change Steps button, now I can define which test steps are included in the bug report. So I'll probably delete the early ones, because the early ones are irrelevant because they're not associated with the bug that I found, for example. So I wouldn't want to include them in the bug report. And all the normal things that you see in the bug report you can see here, like acceptance criteria, what needs to be done to fix the bug. So I have to complete the bug report. Once I'm happy with it, I can just save it away to TFS as before. And here we have a test case which the system has created for me, helpfully, using steps that I've included within the bug report. Obviously needs a little bit of work to make it a bit more meaningful, a bit easier to follow. But at least it's a good starting point. So I'll save that, and that will be stored in TFS along with everything else, and all linked together in a sensible way so that you can always keep a track of the work you're doing, and everything that needs to be linked together so that you can always find a bug or a test case from a requirement, for example. All those linkages are done. Now I can view exploratory test sessions, so I can see the exploratory test that has taken place. I can open that up. I can see the screenshot there. Any bugs that were created during this exploratory test session is listed there. Any test cases will be listed there. So you can see exactly what's gone on during that testing session. Another thing to note, though, is where has the test case actually gone, because it doesn't naturally belong in any test suite, because you weren't following any other test case when it was created. So it always goes into the root of the iteration of the plan. You can always find it there. Now, you can always just copy it to a more sensible place, and then maybe you can have a test suite with just exploratory testing against it, and you copy it there, and then people will always be able to find your exploratory test suites, and they can be verified in exactly the same way as you've seen. Just something quick about test results. You can display the test results for the whole test plan as a whole. So it's quite a nice screen you look at, and it gives you an overview of the whole testing situation within a test plan. You can see how many tests have failed, how many passed, how many have not yet been executed. You can do analysis on your testing sessions, which we haven't had time to look at, but you can try and work out why your tests are failing within a certain test suite, for example, to give you an idea of maybe what needs more attention within your development cycle. And you can filter this information by test suite or by tester, so you can see exactly how things are going, either by an area of the application or by your personnel. And here's an example of the test of the screen. You see here you have a pie chart which tells you how many tests have passed, failed, or not yet been actioned. On the right hand side here you have a simple graph which is set up to go by test suite, so you can see in one particular area you might have a lot of tests that have passed, or you might have a lot of tests which have failed, which means that maybe one requirement, the programming on one particular requirement needs some more attention, and it's throwing up a lot of errors. So it's quite an easy way to get a good overview and do some, but still be able to analyse the overall quality of your application and the test. Okay, and so here's a live example of one that I've just got. You see quite a lot of tests haven't been executed yet, but I've got some failures and some that have passed. It's set up to look at all test suites at the moment, but I can narrow it down, and I can only look at the certain test suites if I want to, or I can look by tester and I can see what the individual personnel have been up to, how they've been working. If there are a lot of outstanding tests that have been assigned to them that haven't been done yet, so I can talk to them maybe to see if there's any kind of problems that they're experiencing. Also, test configurations as well you can sort by. So if there's one particular configuration, if there's a browser, for example, you can look at how your tests are performing under one browser against how they're performing under another browser. So maybe some updates need to be done to make it more compatible with different kinds of hardware or software. All this type of things can be looked at with that screen. So it's quite a useful screen to look at. Okay, so that concludes the material for this demonstration. Just to mention that Test House has much more in-depth sessions on MTM, where you learn a lot more about the tool. Also, we teach about coded UI and web performance testing and loading testing, or combination of all the different testing techniques that have been mentioned, and also how to manage your testing efforts and how testing can fit well inside your development processes. There's some contact details for you to look at. We have a website, Test House microsite, and if you go in there you'll find links to all sorts of interesting, useful resources. And also, just to mention, there's a scheme called DTDPS, which is a Microsoft-sponsored scheme whereby if you buy licenses for Microsoft products, then you can get free consultancy days, at least free to you, but they're paid for by Microsoft, where organisations such as us can come into your organisation to give you training or advice on how best to use these tools and how to use them to produce better quality software. So thank you for your attention, and goodbye.